On today's episode, we recap our Chautauqua experience and break down the results for the incredible Kickstarter event for the Playing with Fire documentary that's going to be released in early 2019. Brian calls in to share some context for the market fluctuations over the last couple weeks. Chris calls in to share some ideas on how to support second and third generation fire. Josh and Matt call in to weigh in on Sam's case study in episode 98. And Hansi asks the community to help her brainstorm frugal or inexpensive activities for couples to enjoy in October and November. Welcome to the ultimate crowdsourced personal finance show. This is your Friday Roundup.
You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
All right, we're back from Chautauqua. So much to catch up on, and to help me with this, I have my co-host Brad here with me today. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Jonathan, I am doing quite well. Yeah, we just got back from quite a long time in Greece. Actually, you were there for almost 2 weeks, right? You had a family vacation before Chautauqua?
It's amazing. So Chautauqua has afforded me the ability to almost get a 2-for-1. I get to hang out with all of our friends from all over the world, and we're meeting sometimes in a different country in many cases, and it kind of adds on to my passport. And then 2, since my family is actually international and my wife is from Zimbabwe, and sometimes it can be difficult to meet back at her home, it's provided her family an excuse to meet us internationally. And so, yeah, we hooked up with them ahead of the conference and went on a cruise and bounced around the different Greek islands. And then I just basically left them right in the middle of that cruise and headed over to Chautauqua. It was really, really cool. And it's kind of expanded my universe a little bit.
Yeah, that's wild. So for the audience, just tell them what you did with this cruise. You literally left the cruise and got on an airplane and left.
Yeah, I didn't even know you could do that. Like I just thought, you got to cruise, that you got to have to account for everybody. Everybody gets off at the same place where they got on. No. We looked into it, and they actually, there were a couple other hoops that you had to jump through. You had to let reception know ahead of time, and they can arrange kind of this disembarkment process. But yeah, so we started in Athens, and then we bounced around a couple of the islands. I think we went to Mykonos, Milos, and Santorini. After a day in Santorini, we were ported there for 2 days, and I actually got off on that second day and then caught a local airport in Santorini back to Athens, and then from Athens to Thessaloniki to hook up with you guys for Chautauqua. And yeah, it was really unusual. And I'll be honest with you, there were several different points which I was convinced that it wasn't going to work, but it worked. It was great. Add that little tool to your toolbox. You don't necessarily have to finish the cruise in the exact same place that you started.
I'm not sure this is the most actionable tip that we've ever passed along, right? But
well, actionable, maybe useful.
Oh, that's funny. But speaking of actionable, and of course I want to come back to Greece and talk about, but since you mentioned Santorini, I didn't even tell you this. I know that's one of the board games that people have mentioned on our Facebook group as especially good for families and kids and such. And I actually use that Camel website that you told me about probably a year and a half ago at this point. And that has become one of the best life tips that I've ever come across. Essentially every product on Amazon, which is more or less every product that you could ever buy, the price is incredibly variable within any given calendar year, like almost shockingly so. Sometimes like plus or minus 50% I've seen on many products. And you're able to put in price alerts. So I actually put in a price alert for Santorini, the board game, and I just got an email from them about 20 minutes before we started recording, and I just went and bought the game already. That is just such a cool life hack. Camel.com.
Yeah, I wish we could be an affiliate for Camel, but it's so useful. We keep talking about it. It has transformed my purchasing process, in particular on board games. And, as awesome as Santorini is, and actually I don't have that board game. I need to look into that one. But as awesome as Santorini was, I would love to talk about Chautauqua at Cavo Olimpo at the foot of Mount Olympus. Man, what an incredible week.
Yeah, it's almost hard to put into words. I'm still really processing the whole week and how impactful it was. I have read about Chautauquas for over 5 years now. And I think that was one of the interesting things is I saw that comment that I left on Mr. Money Mustache's blog in like September of 2013, I think it was. And we talked about this when we had Jim Collins and the rest of the speakers from Chautauqua on the podcast here a couple of months ago. But I basically said like how it was one of my life's goals to go on this Chautauqua and spend time with this community. Now to see it come to fruition, not only as an attendee, but as a speaker, was just mind blowing for me. And it far surpassed even my very lofty expectations.
And Brad, it's hard to say this, but I don't think I appreciated as well what an incredible event this could possibly be. And I think in my own defense, it's hard to fathom how awesome this event is until you have actually experienced it. And I'm convinced that Alan and Katie joining when they did and putting their energies into this has just taken this to a completely new level. And I got a chance to talk to Alan and Jim about this, and the waiting list for that event was so incredibly long. I don't know what they're going to do, man. This is something that as it's continued to develop and grow, it's just becoming more, there's just so much appeal. There's so many people that want to participate in this. It just keeps growing year after year. And I'm very interested to see how they tackle this because their first and foremost commitment, cool conversations, cool people all around the world. And they are committed to that intimacy, those smaller numbers of maybe bringing in, I think it's like 30 people or less at a time. They don't want to have a single event with, 500 people, 600 people. That's not the goal. It doesn't serve the mission. And you won't truly be able to appreciate that until you've actually experienced that 7-day event. But it's really remarkable. And I'm excited to see what they do with this going into the future.
Yeah, and intimate is the perfect way to describe it. I know we've talked about community here for almost 2 years on this podcast and just how important it is. And to see it there at Chautauqua, it was just the best example where we have basically a week and it's just us spending time with each other. Sure, there are presentations and there are amazing things that Alan and Katie Donegan put on throughout the week to see some of the culture and travel around and do fun games and such. And all that stuff is amazing. But to me, it was about the conversations. It was about the people and that connection and that community. And it's almost hard to fathom, honestly, Jonathan, like how many lifelong friends I think I made that week. And now I have friends all over the world in this FI community. And that's what people were talking about. You're building up this network of, hey, many of us are travelers, right? And now when I go to Zurich or I go to Toronto or Seattle or San Diego or Charleston, South Carolina, or wherever it may be, Italy, I have friends there now who I just spent this incredible week with. It's not just like this fleeting thing where you're never going to get back in touch with them. Like I legitimately expect to contact these people and hang out with them in the future. And I just thought that was quite a powerful takeaway for me.
And Brad, if I were going to kind of take what you just said and use that as a springboard, I want to talk about the two things that I saw one was the community, realizing that you're not in this alone and that there's a community of like-minded people that are excited to support you in this process. And then for me, I was so blown away by the emphasis on taking action and talking about mission alignment, man. That's something that we have spent so much time. How do we get this from just being vapor, right? Great ideas floating around in space and getting you to do one thing in your life, getting you to take action on something that you know is going to thrust you into a better place in this world. I just saw that almost with every single person that came to this group. There's something that made you realize that this was important. There's something that got you to go through the resistance of getting yourself out of your normal life for a 1-week period of time and getting to another country and spending it with people that to that point, you only know on the internet, right? I mean, that's serious resistance. But what I saw over and over again by the end of that week, there was significant action there. There was maybe an idea, something they were grappling with or something that they wanted to do. And by the end of that week, they had either started it or they had walked away with action steps to start as soon as they get home.
Yeah, it was really powerful to see that camaraderie and helping others. It was all just tied together perfectly. Yeah, like you said, people were taking action. There was one woman who we actually had a one-on-one with that was life-changing in and of itself. And she wanted to start a YouTube channel. Other people actually helped her record her first videos. And it was neat to see her just light up. But Jonathan, it emboldened me for my real life. I realized that while I talk about connection and I talk about a lot of things on this podcast that I'm trying to make better in my life, I fall down on a lot of this quite often. It's just something I want to be better on. I want to have a better schedule where I'm actually doing the things that I think add a ton of value to my life on a daily and weekly basis, instead of just saying, oh, I know I should do that. I know I should exercise, or I know I should go on a walk with my wife, or meditate in the morning, or all these things that I do occasionally, but I don't do as frequently as I want. And to me, really the biggest thing is that community. I have a lot of acquaintances here in Richmond, and we have a Choose FI community, and we have many people who we get together occasionally, but it's just not that day-to-day, week-to-week thing. And this is something that, especially being at Chautauqua and seeing all of these amazing conversations go on every hour, I realize just how much I'm missing that in my real life. It's going to be my express goal for 2019 to make that happen in my life and in my community, because I see how powerful it is, and I want everyone to experience that.
And in summary, Brad, just a huge shout out to the organizers, Alan and Katie, JL Collins, and also Bryce and Christy from Millennial Revolution. They have just put so much energy into making sure that it's an incredible event. And we're just truly grateful that we were invited to be a part of it and that we got to share in that experience. So just high five from Choose FI. Well done, guys. Well done. Hey, Brad, I have a frugal win of the week that I would love to share with you.
Oh, sounds interesting. Is this already from being back from Greece?
Well, I had a bill waiting for me. That's not normally how a frugal win of the week starts, but I had a bill waiting for me in the mail when I got home. And to add some context, my son broke his leg last fall. Everything's fine. He's doing wonderfully. But there was a bill that came back with that broken leg being set and cast. And I think it was for roughly like $2,090, somewhere in that range. To be honest, I was getting ready to pay it. I was on the phone with billing and about to swipe my card. And the person on the other side of the phone asked me, is that going to be okay? And there was like this aspect of hesitancy there. And I was like, well, what if it wasn't okay? And I realized very quickly that essentially what I was doing is just paying cash, right? Because the whole issue was that they did not accept my health share, my Liberty health share. And I've documented in the past that I was just going to pay it and I was going to submit it to Liberty for reimbursement and yada, yada. But I realized that for the same reason that everybody says that Liberty is not insurance, it's just health sharing. That means that I don't have insurance. And if I don't have insurance, I could ask for a self-pay adjustment or a cash adjustment. So I did that. And she said, oh, well, yeah, let me check on that for you and I'll call you back. She never called me back. And I got home and my new adjusted bill, I'm looking at it right now with a massive smile on my face, is $826.19. It looks like just by asking for a cash pay discount, it saved me $1,200 plus.
So you saved $1,260 some odd dollars just for literally asking the question? That is remarkable.
It's like having insurance. It's like the most expensive thing I could have done.
That's funny though, that you were going to literally pay it. And then just that one question, about as good a 5-second investment as you could ever make.
Oh my goodness. I know. And it like totally expanded my universe on, we all have expressed frustration at the healthcare system. And this is not a conversation where I'm just telling you how we have it all figured out and how Liberty Health Share is the best thing ever. I mean, there are downsides to this. We've talked about it. We've explored it. But it strikes me that we have these two parallel prices. We have, well, what do you pay if there's cash? And what do you pay if you have insurance? And it's just funny numbers, right? I mean, it's just like if you were to ask someone, what is the cash price for a procedure? It's actually hard to get that information. In many cases, the facilities don't even know. So you just make up some number that you send off to the insurance, and then knowing that the insurance is going to give you some perceived discount, which is just basically them negotiating a discount. And then you add on to that your premiums and your deductibles. And it's so complicated. At its core, it's pretty simple. Hey, what is the price if I'm just paying cash? Then you just figure it out on the backside. So I don't know. That's my frugal one of the week. My adjusted price, $826, saving over $1,200 by asking for a self-pay cash discount. And I mean, this was not a negotiation. This was not me like strong arming or using precise words. It was literally me saying, do you have a self-pay cash discount? End of story.
That's cool. And it was just you literally asking a question. You could hear it in her voice that she wanted to help you. So that's really cool.
All right, Brad. Well, there's a few other things that we need to catch up on. We batch produced several of these episodes so that we could then take off a couple weeks and go overseas. As a result, there's a lot of stuff that's actually happened. And this Friday Roundup gives us the perfect opportunity to keep, ourselves, our audience, the community connected with some of the things that are moving forward. And one of the largest things that comes to my mind is the insanely amazing progress of the Kickstarter event for the documentary Playing with Fire.
Yeah, this was incredible, Jonathan. They wound up getting 1,088 backers who pledged money to support this documentary and to support the FI community. And yeah, they raised almost $102,000, which is just remarkable. I know their initial goal was $40,000. And the way Kickstarter works, basically, if you don't reach that goal, you get nothing. So that money, we've spoken with Scott and Travis and the team there, and that money is going to be spent in wonderful and impactful ways. And certainly it's going to help finish the documentary in the best and most professional manner possible. I think this far surpassed their expectations, but also it's going to help with a release tour, which is going to be fantastically fun. I think there's a real high likelihood that we're going to travel around. Many of the people in this documentary are going to travel around and go to these big release parties and showings with, hopefully we'll have hundreds and hundreds of people from the FI community show up to each of these. And yeah, certainly stay tuned on this. We will keep everyone updated, certainly as the information comes to us. We don't know precisely where or when these will be, but I would anticipate it would probably be somewhere early February in all likelihood.
Sounds like a road trip, Brad.
Yeah, that could be the ultimate in road trips, right?
Absolutely. So anyways, January or February will be here before you know it. I know that all hands on deck trying to get that to the finish line, and the FI community made that possible, absolutely made that possible. All right, well, we have this wonderful episode to talk about this week. We had this really, frankly, in my mind, Brad, long overdue conversation on generous giving on the path to FI with Michael Peterson. He brought it.
Yeah, he sure did. This was quite an episode. What an interesting life. I think in taking notes for this episode, I think I have like 20 different quotes from him. And obviously I can't mention them all here on the podcast.
Oh, we can try. We can try.
Yeah, I mean, spending money on other people brought so much more enjoyment than buying things. That's the one that really spoke to me above all. And then just so many of these. We knew on a hypothetical level that material things are not that important. But I think when we were living in the midst of some of the poorest people in the world and seeing how full of joy and how full of purpose, it really reminded us not to get caught up in that hamster wheel. So many of these quotes just spoke to me. I mean, it's amazing to see that. And he's lived this life. He went with 3 of his friends on this trip around the world and got to see how people lived and really become enmeshed in these cultures and societies. And also he's saying, like, the one thing we found was even in the midst of that adventure, life starts to get stale and boring. You do something enough and it loses its edge and you start to become dissatisfied. And where they found that true purposeful life is being part of a tight-knit community and pouring yourself into something outside of yourself. So yeah, I mean, Jonathan, I could go on and on here, but yeah, which of his quotes spoke to you most?
Yeah, there were several, and I wish you had shared your written down quotes with me. Does that need to be part of my process where I write them down ahead of time? But I think the frame for me was the biggest thing. It was more of a mindset shift, and giving is kind of built into what I've done for years and years. But I thought the purpose that he added behind it was so incredible. I think this is the first time that's been verbalized out loud. Someone saying out loud, I work at this point because I want to be able to continue to give more. You know, like if I were going to stop, not if I were going to stop working, I would then have to figure out whether or not it's a 3% or a 4% or a 5% withdrawal rate. But if I were to stop working, I would not be able to give as much. And that was so profound. And it just resonated with me at my core. And I think that it probably resonated with a lot of people in our audience that feel some level of that.
Yeah, that was amazing. I mean, I've never heard or have even contemplated someone doing that who they don't need to work, but they are literally working for whatever it is, a month, a couple months, just to earn money to be able to impact the world. And in his case, he has this foundation in El Salvador that essentially helps other organizations become more efficient. Yeah, that really was incredibly impressive. And I think just going back to where he's saying some of the poorest people in the world and seeing how full of joy and full of purpose they are. So many people in our country, in America, and maybe the rest of the developed world look at maybe what we call these third world countries, right? And almost feel this sense of sadness and maybe feeling bad, as much as I hate to say that. You know, I've heard that sentiment before, but man, many of those people live with this joy and this contentedness. And it's because, to a large degree, they're in these tight-knit communities, right? That was the exact quote that Michael said, tight-knit community. He said that a handful of times. And you see it when you travel around. And there is a longing for that, especially for many of us in these suburban islands. I live in a suburb, and while we have friends around, it's just not the same. It's not that same day-to-day thing. Even Jonathan, when we went to Greece, there are people, we went to a dinner with the rest of the Chautauquans. We were out for 3 or 4 hours, and it was just this beautiful, like open air set of restaurants. And people, I guarantee you, were there until 3 or 4 in the morning, just sitting, telling stories, laughing, and just enjoying their food and enjoying their time with their friends and their family. And it was so cool to see that. And I've certainly experienced that in my travels around the world.
There were two really big points that I wanted to talk about, and I think both of them were illustrated perfectly in this past week's episode. One was hedonic adaptation and kind of comparing yourself to, I guess, your peers, people in your neighborhood, and such. Michael actually made a fantastic point that he doubted whether or not most of the savings that people experience with geo arbitrage is from actually whether or not one country is less expensive than another. I mean, there are examples of that. Clearly, I've seen that. But he said the larger point is that you get, just by being willing to consider geo arbitrage, you basically condensed down your life into a couple suitcases, and your expectations for what your lifestyle will become radically different, because you don't need a 3-car garage because you don't have stuff, right? Because you're willing to go overseas and live in an area in a smaller square footage that serves the exact needs that you have now. That was something that I hadn't contemplated quite as much, and I'm still kind of sifting through that. But I think it speaks to this idea of our natural instinct is to compare ourselves to those around us. For example, Susie Orman feels very poor when she compares herself to Oprah. It just is a matter of fact. And to her billionaire friends, oh, poor me with my smaller amount of money over here. I'm only worth $100 million. How can I survive? But I think, and that's, satire, but probably not too far off. But conversely, how much we kind of do the same thing. We compare ourselves to people whose incomes we perceive as being more, and we're always trying to fit into that mold. And that's the value of being in the stealth wealth community, where you're actually trying to contract that. You're battling hedonic adaptation. And when you can pull that off, you end up with that sense of enough, that sense of contentment. And it's incredibly powerful to realize that is a superpower. Your ability to do that, to fight the wave of hedonic adaptation that's thrust at you from marketing, can allow you to retire decades ahead of your peers.
Yeah, and Jonathan, I thought that point from Michael was especially interesting about how living in other countries, it's not an apples to apples comparison. My 4-bedroom house is not what I'm going to be living in if I travel to Estonia or Portugal or even the UK, right? And stay there for a month or two. You're going to be getting a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment. So that was interesting. I've been trying, actually, while you're talking, to pull up a website. There's this really cool travel comparison that actually shows cost of living. And if I do find it, we'll put it in the show notes. But it was exactly that. And it spoke precisely to what Michael's saying. Yeah, the cost of living is dramatically less, but it's because you don't have that hedonic adaptation or that just hoarding of stuff. Our lives get very expensive in real life. I mean, I know I traveled with 2 tiny little suitcases to Greece, and frankly, I was embarrassed that it wasn't one. I was
embarrassed for you. Look at that sucker, 2 suitcases.
Well, amongst the Chautauquans, I was this oddball outlier. I mean, there were people who traveled with just a small carry-on between the 2 of them and a couple backpacks. So, I mean, it was really neat. You just don't need that much. But I guess my point was, I had all the clothes I essentially owned in life and my laptop, and I was gone for 12 days, and I could have been gone for 6 months, and I really would not have needed much more than that. So yeah, it's amazing how much we can accumulate in our real lives and convince ourselves that we need it.
And Brad, the bigger point here is that there are some natural implications if that's true. If geo arbitrage is really more about you than it is about your location, that means that you can pull this off anywhere. When you realize you probably don't need 3 cars just because you have it and it's kind of a pain to sell it, you could probably get rid of it. I know people that have no cars and have designed their life and are crushing an 80+% savings rate because they just don't have to deal with that. It's just one of the things they've reduced. They live close to work. They walk there. They commuter transportation or public transportation. They just have designed their life in a way that they don't need that. Imagine the impact when you go from 3 cars down to 1 car or no cars. If you don't have 3 cars, you don't need a 3-car garage. The impact when you're not looking for a house that needs a 3-car garage. The impact when you realize that you don't need 3 or 4 bathrooms. The impact when, just your ability to say, do I really need all of this unused space? We were talking with an individual several weeks ago that basically says, we have I think he said 5,000 plus square foot house for me, my wife, and our child. We never see each other. We're in like different wings. Like imagine you feel the impulse to then design each of these rooms and give these rooms characters. When you have that much space, each room needs its own character. And imagine how much money you can burn through trying to have a coordinated home when you have 5,000 plus square feet. This is just common sense stuff, and you can play this down. So that the larger point being, though, if that's really the case and we can see the matrix, we can then make lifestyle choices and get that geo arbitrage benefit without ever leaving our zip code. Just interesting to contemplate and think about. But I wanted to go to probably of the two, the more impactful point from this episode. So point 2 was really about stewardship. And I actually wanted to tie this to something that was incredibly profound that J.L. Collins actually said at this past Chautauqua. And he was talking about leaving a legacy. And you got to realize that for the people that discover financial independence in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and maybe even 50s, depending on how well of a job they've done up to this point, this is not about whether or not it's going to be a 5% withdrawal rate, a 4%, or a 3%. You are going to have so much money left over for the vast majority of people when you finish that it's like, what do I want my impact to be? What do I want to do with that? And so a lot of people find themselves in this situation, and that's then the conversation becomes about an inheritance. Do I want to leave something for my child? And that's kind of one of the reasons this second generation fire conversation is so interesting, because that's a value choice and it's made on different things. But I think a lot of the reason that there's some debate on which side of that to land is, well, you don't want to ruin your kids and you want them to be able to have a similar experience. In my mind, most of that is negated when we start talking about the concept of stewardship. And I thought J.L. Collins said it probably better than anybody that I've heard say it up to this point. And he said, look, I'll be honest with you. There's no way that I could spend, I'm sure I could spend it, but practically speaking, there's no way that I can spend my net worth at this particular point in time. And there will be something left over. And even at this point for myself, I don't view this as my money. It's not really my money. I am a steward of this money and I can benefit from it up to 4% a year, but I'm a steward of it and I want it to have an impact on this world and help make this world a better place. And when there will be something left for my daughter and she's going to have this, and it's not her money. It's not her money. She's a steward of the money and she can benefit from it up to 4% a year, but she's a steward of the money. And I realize that that's where I am at as well. That's why the conversation is so important for me, to my son and to my children down the road, is that I want to teach them stewardship. I'm teaching myself stewardship. What does it mean to be a good steward of the resources that we've been able to accumulate up to this point? And same with them. And I think when your mindset includes giving, when that's a core belief, when stewardship is a core belief, that's when you start changing the world.
Yeah, stewardship and this generous giving, it's perfectly tied hand in hand. It's amazing to see you tie that thread, and I like that a lot. I had never contemplated it before I heard Jim mention that, but that was one of those kind of lightning bolt moments of, you need to steward this money and you need to consider what will happen beyond you, or what your impact can be, even if it's not beyond your years, but in your lifetime. That's a beautiful thing that obviously once you get to FI, or even maybe along that path to FI, but certainly once you get to FI, like, you're in a position that is unlike almost anyone else in this culture in the world. I think we need to be mindful of that. And Jonathan, you and I need to do a solid job of this moving forward, of keeping this in mind and bringing it up on this podcast as we explore our own lives, right? Like, that's the fun about this is a journey for me and you. This is a journey for the community. And as we evolve and as we learn more, we need to consider this new information and talk through it and see, what does the community think? There might be people listening to this who say, that's not of real interest to me. I don't want to think 2, 5, 10 generations down the road. I want to think about my own life and the impact I can have. So I totally get that. And I'd love to, frankly, just hear people's feedback. So hopefully we get some comments on the Facebook group and via email. So yeah, this is an interesting one to me.
We got this great comment from Lou, and he says, I just finished listening to the episode, and my heart is beating so fast out of pure excitement. This resonates with me. Ever since I discovered you guys this past year, my life has truly changed for the better. I had no real financial plan to guide me and a lot of debt to deal with. Now, consumer debt is something of the past, and I'm saving up to 52% of my income as of September. But the part that really excites me is that I've been able to give away money to more and more causes that really speak to me, one of which is the documentary Playing with Fire. Giving is by far the most important reason leading and inspiring me to pursue financial independence. I'm a classically trained singer, pianist, and most classical singers or pianists are told over and over they could never earn enough money to put food on the table unless they are part of the elite 1% in the world, performing in the most prestigious opera house or concert halls. I am truly grateful, due in part to your efforts at Choosify and my diligence in the practice room. Can't get away from practicing. Not only do I have food on the table, but I can also contribute money to bringing classical music to some of the public schools and senior living centers in my area. Geo arbitrage led me to move from New York to a small town in Oklahoma. It's true, the art scene is nowhere near as vibrant as in New York, but being able to give to those in need and save for the future is oh so worth it. Thanks for pushing me and all of us really to grow a little bit better each and every day. You know, I think this is it, right, Brad? It's highlighting these stories and looking to pair stewardship and giving to impact. And that's a theme that I hope with you that we can be very intentional on cultivating and really highlighting more and more. There's a movement out there called effective altruism, which kind of has run a parallel thread in terms of gaining steam with the financial independence community. And it's this idea of there are 80-20 ways to give to have maximum impact. And let's look past bureaucracy and paperwork, and let's look at how we can have the biggest impact on the world. It's a very FI way of looking at this process. And maybe there'll be a way for us to cultivate that going into the future.
Yeah, I love just the concept of impact. And I think that's something we need to explore further as well, because not only is there macro impact, like you're talking about with effective altruism, but you can have micro impacts on your community and people in your lives. And I had talked a few months ago about our desire basically to kind of help support our local elementary school that our kids go to and their individual teachers. We are just huge supporters here at Choosify and certainly in our family of teachers and educators across the country, across the world. And I realized like so many teachers, they have things that they need for their classrooms. They have projects that they'd love to do, but they don't get the budget from their schools and they cannot pay for it out of their own pocket. But the nice thing is we can help with that. We literally went to our two daughters' teachers and asked them, do they have a wish list of items that they want for their classroom or things that would especially help the learning environment? Even though it felt a little weird for us to do that, honestly. And I'm not sure why, but it just felt a little bit awkward at first. But we were so passionate about it that we got over that and sent the email. And they were both just beyond thrilled. And they sent us each a list. And I think we literally bought every single item on each of their wish lists. They were just so appreciative. And just to see these items now in our kids' classrooms, just because we sent that email and we were willing to lend a hand. It's a really neat feeling. So yeah, I certainly understand what Michael is saying about just seeing it when you're actually helping people person to person, and then all the way up to how effective you can be and efficient through this effective altruism. So yeah, it's a fascinating conversation.
So in summary, this, for me, Brad, this was a paradigm shifting episode. I think it's one that we will look back on and realize that it opened up doors for us to have different types of conversations. And I think we'll always be grateful for Michael coming on the show and really being willing to share his story. And I think this platform is better for it. All right. Well, this is a crowdsourced show, and I think this would be the perfect opportunity. Let's go ahead and open this up, and let's bring in some voicemails and feedback from the community. And I think we should start by talking about this little, would you call it a hiccup, Brad, in the markets this past week while we were overseas?
Yeah, I guess it's been going on for a couple of weeks now. And yeah, hiccup maybe is the best way to describe it. I know it was a the sky is falling type moment for many people, but to me, I don't know. I was fairly...
Let me just go ahead and interrupt you here. Did you check your personal capital account?
No, I definitely did not. And that was a real funny thing, actually, is we were at Chautauqua with 30 odd people who ostensibly are there to talk about financial things. And I don't think it came up one time unless maybe to talk about how uninterested people were, right?
No,
which is so
nobody
cool.
asked me about it. We didn't talk about it at all. I didn't even think about that. So it wasn't just me and you that didn't check our accounts. Like literally nobody there even thought it was conversation worthy.
No, not even remotely conversation worthy. It's just the way that it works. The markets rise, they fall, sometimes significantly so. But you have to just know that long term, this is the best path. And that's the way that I approach it personally. So yeah, I don't get too worried. Even when, frankly, if it drops 10%, that's a very large number for me to lose, quote unquote, on net worth on paper. But it's just something that I just don't get bothered about.
What if you were like a millionaire right before? You had just become a millionaire for the first time, quote unquote, on paper. And then the next day you were back down to like 940 and you're like, son of a
yeah. Well, I'm sure.
I was a millionaire for a day
and did happen.
But it was well timed because we actually got a voicemail from Brian Feraldi from the Motley Fool, who we actually interviewed back in episode 75, The Unique Advantages of the Individual Investor. It's an incredible episode, and it's very complimentary to a lot of the ideas that we've actually talked about up to this point. But he wanted to comment basically on what we were just discussing, the market, what it's been doing, and kind of provide some context. So I think this is going to be a value add for our community, and we'll go ahead and play it now.
Hey, Brad and Jonathan. It's your buddy Brian from Rhode Island. I recently received a number of messages from friends and family about the recent stock market decline, and I also saw a couple of posts in the Facebook group from people that are worried. For those that don't know, this Vanguard Total Stock Market Index is now down about 10% from its recent high and has officially entered correction territory. Whenever people see their net worth suddenly drop, especially people that are new to investing, it's very natural for them to get worried and start to panic about whether or not they should sell. I thought it would be useful to call in to remind people that panicking is never a smart move, even though I know firsthand that it's no fun to see your net worth suddenly drop for no reason. I also wanted to share some general information about stock market declines that can help to put the recent move into perspective. So historically speaking, the market falls about 5% from its recent high about 3 times per year. It drops 10% from its peak about once every 11 months, 15% on average every 2 years, 20% every 4 years, 30% about once per decade, 40% every 2 to 3 decades, and it makes downward moves of 50% about 2 to 3 times per century. It's important for everyone listening to know that these drops are completely normal and that the market has always rebounded from its lows eventually. Since there's no way to predict whenever a decline is going to happen, the best thing that people can do is to ignore them and just stick with their current plan. In fact, you could argue that lower prices are a good thing for everyone who is a net buyer of stocks in the long term, which is what most people are that are on the path to financial independence. I also wanted to put things into perspective by saying that prices today, after the huge 10% decline, are back to where they were in May of 2018. That's right, the market is back to where it was about 5 months ago. So really, there's no reason to look at anything that this decline is anything but a short-term anomaly. While prices can always fall further, and they're never fun, as long as you're bullish on the long-term potential of humanity, then the best thing to do is ignore the movements and stick to your plan. Thanks for all you do. Have a great day.
Bullish on the long-term potential of humanity.
Yeah, that is very profound. Yeah, that was one of the 3 things that I wrote down. And there's no way to predict these short-term price swings. There's just simply no way. But if you're, like he said, bullish on the long-term potential of humanity, staying the course makes the most sense. And he also said it's a good thing when prices go down for net buyers, right? And we've heard many people, most specifically Jim Collins, talk about this, where you're getting it on sale. It's never good, obviously, mentally, to see your net worth go down. But if you reframe that as, hey, I'm putting money in every single month, buying more shares, well, you literally are getting more shares for your dollar in that essence, and you're buying a higher percentage of these companies. Obviously, it's still this infinitesimal amount, but you are literally buying a higher percentage with every dollar you put in. And that's a really cool little reframe on, hey, I'm getting this on sale. And I think that will help people mentally.
Yeah, I mean, that's a point that's worth saying and then repeating and then saying a different way to fully conceptualize it. And also kind of moving it outside of the stock market, because this is the only place that we freak out when something's going on sale. So Brian made a point there. The vast majority of people listening to this show are on the path to financial independence. I'm sure we do have some retirees that are listening, but the vast majority of people are on the path. They're pursuing it. And very simply, if we were to talk about anything else, let's talk about the brand new iPhone, the iPhone XS, whatever. I like that, XS. Good choice of words there. But let's talk about the brand new iPhone. And for a 2-week period of time, instead of paying $1,000 for it, it's 50% off. It's 50% off, right? Is that a bad thing or a good thing for the individuals that are at the point where they want to purchase one of these? Immediately, you're like, oh yeah, 50% off would be great. But most of us can't, for whatever reason, can't internalize that when it comes to talking about the stock market. And then we say, oh, it's 50% off. This is a good thing. If you're on the accumulation phase, if you are pursuing financial independence, when things go on sale, when your investment vehicles go on sale, you get excited and you follow your plan. Thank you, Brian, for being willing to contribute that. I think that is probably a wonderful value add for many people in the community that are just looking for some historical context for what is this. One thing I should have added, Brad, for some context, actually, to Jim's comment about stewardship was, in his mind, he's visualizing this as 7 generations of stewardship. What will this look like 7 generations from now? And knowing about time value of money and power of compounding, that's frankly insane just to contemplate. I think on this show, we have been able to successfully track down first, second, and third generation. I think third generation is the farthest we've been able to track down at this point. It'll be actually really cool to see us be able to document past that 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th at some point. But I have a voicemail that we got from Chris. He's calling in to discuss 3rd and 2nd generation FI. He says that one way to do this is to support childhood entrepreneurship. So let me go ahead and pull up this voicemail.
Hey guys, just want to leave a message because you guys are always talking about 2nd, 3rd generation FI. If there's one life lesson I've ever heard that would really support that, it's really been to support childhood entrepreneurship. And that's really very simple things. Like if you ever see someone who is running a lemonade stand, something like that, just buy a cup of lemonade. Really, really small, simple things. One of my bosses who I worked for early in my life impressed that upon me, and it really made a large impact just in the way I thought about supporting opportunities. And I feel like it's completely, coherent to the cause. And I just wanted to spread that along. Thank you very much. Get a ton of value from everything you guys do. Thank you.
Yeah, Chris, this is a really good point. So many kids are just trying to explore and trying to create something, right? I know my own daughters have done different lemonade stands and bake sales, and to usually try to raise money for charity. It's just neat to see their excitement level and see how much they get into this. And you can just see that this is going to help propel them. So yeah, like you said, everybody that stops and just gives $1 for that cup of lemonade or that cookie that they baked, it's just really important. So thank you for that. And Jonathan, we actually met someone at Chautauqua whose daughter sells bracelets that she creates. And I think she's made over $6,000 in sales. It was just mind blowing to me.
That was a wonderful conversation. I know Jocelyn was saying that with her daughter who did this, giving back was a massive piece of this. She has with her profits, whatever she makes, she takes a percentage of that to buy more supplies. She has a percentage, which was actually relatively small, that she keeps for herself. And then the vast majority of it was actually something that for her was a way that she could give back. And I think they're partnering with was it a children's hospital, Brad?
I believe so, yeah.
And just really cool to have those values instilled at a young age. And I completely agree. And I think, frankly, sometimes selfishly, when I see the Girl Scout cookies being rolled out, I'm thinking, oh man, I can't afford that around my waistline. But I may have missed the larger point. I may have missed the larger point, which is you're right. You're totally right. It's important to support this mentality of entrepreneurship. And also, it is end of October going into November when this is aired. And we got this awesome comment from Hansi on the Facebook group, thought this might be a fun question to crowdsource from the group. I am making a Halloween advent calendar for my significant other. I'm trying to come up with 31 free or cheap things to do for 2 adults who love the season. Most of these also have to be feasible for weeknights. I know it sounds cheesy, but I thought this would be similar to the planned spontaneity mentioned on the previous episode. She crowdsourced this and got a bunch of feedback. I thought that we could kind of turn some of those ideas into conversation. And frankly, I love that she tied it to planned spontaneity, because I think part of the whole planned spontaneity thing is you need to have a few things kind of in the back burner that you'd like to do, because the day you actually have time and you actually have the mental bandwidth to tackle something, is probably a bad day to start Googling stuff. Not say you can't do it, but if you already have a list of things that you'd like to do, it's just much more likely that you are going to get out there and do something like go to the zoo if you know where the zoo is, basically. And so, Brad, anyways, I'd be curious. I know you were kind of reading through those same comments. Was there anything that really stood out to you?
Yeah, well, first, I just love the concept of planned spontaneity. And I know Mrs. Adventure Rich talked about this in episode 76. And yeah, we literally got laminated maps. My mom bought me these two incredible laminated maps of the state of Virginia and our local Richmond, VA. We have them up. And like you just said, you don't want to be Googling this on the day of you want to do something. You want to have these plans set in advance so you can actually do them. But yeah, I also want to read here some of these comments because they can do a whole heck of a lot better job than I can. Marie said, what a fun idea. Haunted houses are fun. Hayride, making cider, or taking a haunted tour somewhere. Mary said, moonlit walk, carving pumpkins, drive to look at fall foliage. And yeah, just reading down, jump around in leaves. Andrea said, pumpkin patch, decorate the house, bob for apples. And I'm sure you're going to read a bunch that jumped out to you. But yeah, drive to look at fall foliage. I know that's something that we do, or we certainly try to do each year. We have a lot of just beautiful countryside around us, and we have Shenandoah National Park. I think it's only less than an hour and a half from where I live in Richmond. So we go there definitely a couple times a year just to hike and just see the foliage, see the beauty of nature. So yeah, I know that's a big one for me that I would add is just get out in nature and hike around.
There were so many great ideas. I'm actually going to link to this thread in the show notes for today's episode because, I mean, there's no way that we could list them all, but I think so many of us have the, what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? And you just can't get past that, so you end up just watching TV, right? And when you look at this list, by the time that you read enough of these comments, you're like, I got to go do something because I'm just missing out. And there's just a lot of great stuff here. So let's get super techie with it. Jill suggested, my neighbor really decorates for Halloween. If yours does, take a walk one evening to enjoy all the creative decorations. You could even pick a favorite, get their address, and send them a note letting them know they won your unofficial contest. She also suggested carve a pumpkin and sneak it onto an elderly neighbor's porch late one night. And then this one was from Rachel. Toast pumpkin seeds, make homemade applesauce, haunted house, pumpkin patch, corn maze, pick apples at an orchard. Do a long walk around the neighborhood. Personally, Brad, I have done a bonfire in the backyard several times and also a movie night. You can also create some sort of warm beverage, alcoholic, pumpkin, apple cider. What could go wrong? It'd be amazing, right?
That's quite a drink.
Maybe not all at once. Suba said, make apple cider donuts or mole cider. Yvette says, I'm not much of a gamer, but my husband and I enjoy playing zombie video games together. We have some truly creepy VR games, and I'm looking forward to digging into Halloween month. Maybe we can find an arcade and bring a few rolls of quarters for a date night. Kevin, actually, Brad, in our community, so I don't have a virtual reality setup, tech guy here, but I don't have one. But Kevin does, and he has basically offered anytime if we want to bring our local group together and do a VR night, we could do it. Now, there's zero chance you could get me to put VR goggles on to experience like a horror movie in 3D. I can't even do it in 2D, much less 3D. But can you imagine? I would not be able to sleep for weeks at a time. But it's still, that would be awesome to do some form of community event as well. And man, Brett, I mean, after reading all these ideas, I feel like I want to go do something now.
Yeah, this is a good time of year to be outside. And yeah, a lot of these are really fun things out in nature. My daughters actually, while we were in Greece, I kind of missed out on this, but they went to the pumpkin patch and they took a hayride and they got to pick out pumpkins and they went in one of those corn mazes. Yeah, there's just so many fun things to do, both inside and outside. But for me, my bias is get outside. It's so gorgeous this time of year. It's not hot. You put on a sweatshirt and you just go enjoy yourself. It's really great.
And Brad, we're kind of tying together some threads here because the other week that we were out of town was with Sam's episode on paying down hyper debt. So like over $500,000 in student loan debt. And she was a dentist working in California. And we kind of documented her story in episode, I believe that's episode 98, which is it's a very interesting listen. But we've gotten some feedback that I think is worth playing. We got 2 voicemails that both kind of present either confirmation or maybe a slightly different take on a strategy if you are interested in pursuing one of these careers that could very likely have a very high student loan debt burden right along with it. And this first voicemail that we got is from Josh.
Hi, my name is Josh Prentice, and I am a dentist in Bend, Oregon. I've been listening to the Choose FI podcast for about 4 or 5 months. My buddy Matthew Lee turned me onto it. He is a dentist that used the Air Force scholarship to pay for all of his dental school. He actually called in the other day and left you guys a voicemail. We both got fired up by the same episode. The episode, I think it was with Samantha from USC, about taking out her dental school loans and how the decisions she used to make that. So Matthew has an amazing blog. It's about using that Air Force scholarship to pay for all of his school. He saved half of his stipend while he was in school and graduated basically debt-free. And you guys ought to look into him and his blog. He's a fantastic guy. So anyways, I listened to the episode, and obviously it fired both Matt and I up enough that we wanted to call in, because you look at this and you go, wow, that's crazy that someone would make a decision to take out that much student loan to be a dentist. Matt, I feel like, offers the total flip side of it, where you can get out of dental school debt-free and make a great income. I am in the middle ground. So I applied for the same scholarship that Matt applied for. I was a runner-up, didn't get it. But instead of going to Tufts in Boston and paying $380,000 for 4 years of dental school, I stayed in our home state of Oklahoma. Graduated from dental school and with about $220,000 in student debt, so almost half of what it would have cost to go to Boston. Got out and elected to not take the low-paying $135,000 that you can be guaranteed from any corporate place as a dentist, and instead go work in a rural area. So by working in a rural area, I worked in a busy group practice. My income was more than double what that guarantee would be from a corporate dental chain in a popular city. I used that to save a bunch of money, utilize the 401k that they had at that office, and I took that money, turned around and bought a practice in Bend, Oregon, and now my wife and I have been changing our life and our lifestyle. So rather than working 5-6 days a week and just working my tail off in Oklahoma, I now own a practice where I've gone from seeing patients 250 days a year in Oklahoma down to 200 last year, down to 168 days a year this year. And every time I've cut back, my income has gone up. So my goal is my wife and I have the practice loan for buying the dental practice. We have my student loans still outstanding. Collectively, it is our intention to pay off nearly $1.2 million within the next 5 years. I think it's a very, very doable process because of the Choose FI habits that we're putting in place, that we've had in place for years. And so I listened to Samantha's episode and went, that's fantastic that she is trying to pay it off, unlike a lot of other classmates that don't. But there are other alternatives, like Matt's option for Air Force paying for school, or buying your own practice and living in an area that you can have a higher income. So anyways, just got fired up, so I had to leave a voicemail. I really appreciate the podcast. It's always motivation. I listened to some episodes, told my wife about them. She's fired up by it too. We're doing budget meetings and just knocking out debt. I think we've paid off 3 or 4 loans, including one of my student loans within the last 6 months. I got so worked up about one of them after listening to an episode that I just logged into my student loan account that morning, paid it off. It was a $6,000 or $7,000 loan. It was gone. And then a couple weekends later, one financial mistake for the hot seat is we had 2 car payments, and at a budget meeting, we said no more. So literally got up from the middle of the budget meeting, sold the car, took the cash, and paid cash for another car. And now we're down to 1 car payment, and we will have 0 soon. So anyways, just thought I'd say thank you and offer up an alternative to the dental school debt and the opportunities that dentistry does provide. So contact me if you want more. Thanks.
Brad, I wanted to interrupt him so many times because I had this massive smile on my face, like basically from like second 5 on.
Yeah, man, I would have loved to have interviewed Josh. I mean, that was a great voicemail, but yeah, I'd love to just follow up. I mean, they have these budget meetings. They sold their car right after a budget meeting. That's crazy. And like Choose FI habits, that one stuck out to me. It's just especially funny. But man, he's bought this practice. He's cut back on the days of working. He's making more money than ever. They're going to pay off the dental practice and his student loan debts in 5 years. What a cool thing.
Well, and this is the part that me and you, and also, by the way, guys, I do have a voicemail from Matt, and we're about to play it in a second here, but I can't just go straight to that voicemail. I love that he's tying it back to Sam's situation. So we're just dealing with kind of the one-dimensional numbers, right? Sam, here's what the situation is, and what's your plan? What are you going to do? And obviously, frankly, we just don't know the ins and outs of dentistry, what you can make as a dentist, where are you making it, that sort of thing. That's just not really something that we can speak to. But this is a community that has access to the same math, right? 2 + 2 is always equal to 4 until you understand compounding. No, 2 + 2 is equal to 4. Like, they just know it, but they also know the income side of the equation, and they know how they've been able to leverage. Like, Sam cannot just get rid of her debt. At that point, she's kind of chosen her path on that side. But what about the income side? We couldn't speak to that. And if she just stays in her current situation, we know what it is. How powerful is it to have people in the community that looked at those same numbers and were able to come up with another solution? You know, for individuals that haven't made the choice to go to this crazy out-of-state expensive school and lock in those crazy numbers, that's where that cautionary tale is so vital. Don't do that. Those numbers are not ideal. There's a better way. But once you're there, what other options do you have? And Josh just crushed it by basically saying, you can control the income side of this equation. You can take the locked in, guaranteed, lowest hanging fruit, which for a dentist, I mean, I know for some people, $120K sounds like a lot, but when you have on the other half of that, you have $500,000 in student loan debt, the math it's brutal. But to be able to say, we can focus on the other side, there's a way that you can double this. That to me is the optimism that I look for.
Yeah, not only double it, but he talked about something that Physician on Fire spoke about when he was on our show, and that in these medical practices, and I guess this extends to dentistry as well, it's almost like reverse of what you would anticipate. In many industries, you're higher paid on the bigger cities, the coastal areas, et cetera. But it seems like in the medical field, it's the exact opposite. He talked about working in a rural area and being able to make more money. And I know Physician on Fire talked about an identical thing.
And also, did you notice how, like in Josh's case specifically, he is designing his lifestyle, right? So he's kind of leveraging entrepreneurship and his very specific skill set. What I love is he's investing. So first he made that unorthodox choice that you're talking about, working in a more remote area, and then leveraging that to then be able to afford the opportunity to buy a practice. And then from that specifically focus on essentially owning a business that it engages him. He's working it down to where he just works half of the year. That's incredible. And he's doing that long before he reaches financial independence.
Yeah, it's a fantastic story. So Josh, thank you for sending it in. And now, Jonathan, I'm waiting on bated breath to hear Matt's voicemail.
Josh teed it up so well, but basically this speaks to that part that you don't need to take out $500,000 in student loan debt to become a dentist. There is a more optimized way. Let's highlight one of those. This voicemail coming in from Matthew.
Hey guys, I just wanted to call in and say thank you so much for all you do. I just finished the entire show and I just listened to the episode with Sam, the USC dental graduate, and I was shocked because I was listening to an alternate version of myself in that show. I actually interviewed at USC Dental School several years ago and chose a slightly different path than Sam. So I wanted to kind of talk about it in this voicemail, a different way to approach this. She actually alluded to it a little bit in her interview, but I am a military dentist. So I graduated dental school in 2014. I have zero debt and about $200,000 in net worth. The way this military scholarship works is that before school or during your first year of dental school, you can apply to one of the military branches and they will cover all or most of your dental school, and then you owe them back a certain amount of years based on how much they paid for. There is a little bit of a reserve component at the end of the payback, but it's very minimal and you don't actually have to do anything for it. It's sort of a special reserve category. So it's not something people should really plan their life around. Other than your school being free, you actually get $2,000 a month while you're in school, roughly. It does vary from time to time. It usually goes up over time. So that's what it was a few years ago. It might actually be a little bit more now. So you get free school and you get $2,000 a month, which equates to about $100,000 over the course of a 4-year education. And you leave with a guaranteed job paying you $100,000 a year. So there are obviously lots of other details that especially dentists would be interested to know, but those are the rough numbers. So here, though, is the ultimate hack. You might be thinking, well, if school is free, then I'll just go wherever the heck I want. But you would be wrong. That is not the best financial decision you can make. You should go to whatever school is located in the area with the lowest cost of living. Because school is free no matter where you go. but this $2,000 a month doesn't change based on where you live. I had a couple of options. I had USC and Oklahoma, and I chose Oklahoma. And it was way, way, way cheaper to live there, and that was why I picked it. I was also close to home, close to my family, and things like that. But if I had gone to USC, that $2,000 would have been out the window quickly. But in Oklahoma City, I literally saved 50% of that $2,000 for my first 2 years of dental school. I got married halfway through dental school, and then we were on good financial footing after that. So fast forward several years, and it is still the best financial decision I have ever made. Every single day I wake up, and I am so thankful that I chose to do what I did. I've gotten to travel to all sorts of cool places. I've lived in Colorado Springs, lived in Alaska for several years. I'm actually back in Colorado again and looking to probably separate next year. But I mean, I am on outstanding financial footing. I've gotten lots and lots of practice, and I've been able to travel to amazing places. So it's definitely something for your listeners to consider, this alternate path. I know the military sounds a little crazy and scary to some people, but the day-to-day is really not that difficult, especially as a dentist. Your job is pretty straightforward. So it's a really good life, and I would recommend it to anybody. If anybody wants more information about it, I do have a blog. I actually don't run any ads on it. I never made any money on it. So people are free to go over there and don't feel like I'm trying to get anything out of you in this process. I just want good information to get out there because I didn't have this when I was applying, and I sort of went in blind, hoping it would work out. Fortunately, it did. But if you want to know more, my blog is usafdds.blogspot.com. For the military folks out there, that's Uniform Sierra Alpha Foxtrot Delta Delta Sierra.blogspot.com. Thank you guys for all you do. My email is on the blog, and I'd be happy to come on the show and chat about any more details if you guys are interested or if your community wants any more information on that. So thank you guys a lot for everything you do, and I hope this helps somebody out there. Bye.
And I'll definitely have a link to his blog in the show notes for today's episode as well. But Matt and Josh, thank you so much for sharing your insight. I mean, you've expanded our collective experience and that information. Like you said, you're flying blind. You don't know what you don't know until you do, but once you see it, it's hard to unsee. And then from there, the fire is spreading. So I couldn't help myself.
How many buzzwords can you fit in 10 seconds? I love it. No, but seriously, like, it's amazing to crowdsource these shows. That's why we do this, because there are limits to our knowledge, obviously, Jonathan. And when you have hundreds of thousands of people in a community, you can crowdsource this and bring in so much information, so much variety. And yeah, huge thanks to Matt and Josh there. And yeah, that was neat where Matt said, this was an alternate version of my life. He was listening to Sam's story. And yeah, that's the beautiful thing, is giving this information sets future people up to make different and more optimized decisions. I love that.
And frankly, not just Matt and Josh, Sam being willing to share her experience does the same thing. I mean, it's critical that you see the other side on this. So I'm grateful to all participants, and hopefully someone down the road will have listened to these and be able to inform their decisions based on it to some varying degree. All right. Well, unfortunately, that is going to bring this episode to a close. Now, as you know, we like to finish every episode by doing a drawing for a copy of a book that we have found useful. And there's 3 books that we offer. The first is J.L. Collins' book, The Simple Path to Wealth. The second is Dominic Cortuccio's book, Design Your Future. And the third book from Vincent Puglisi, Freelance to Freedom. If you want to enter the drawing, all you need to do is go to choosefi.com/iTunes, follow the instructions there, and leave us a short written review on either iTunes or Stitcher. Then send us an email to feedback@choosefi.com, letting us know that you left a review and what screen name you left it under. We give away 1 book for every 5 written reviews that we get, and we announce the winner on the Friday Roundup. Brad, how many winners do we have today?
All right, Jonathan, we have 2 winners today. And the first winner is Nick. And Nick said, I'm not writing this review so other people can read it and factor it into their decision to listen. I figure there are plenty of other reviews for that. I simply want to take a moment to say thank you. In a time where the internet's impact on society can be questionable, this whole financial independence movement and community is an example of the best the internet can be. Among others, I see this podcast and website as a true ambassador to that community. You too, Brad and Jonathan, are doing something special here. I want to tell you too that the hard work is noticed and appreciated. Please continue creating content and tying this community together. Thank you again. All right, and Jonathan, the second winner is Kayla. Kayla said, Choosify is a must-have tool in your arsenal to conquer the hamster wheel. I started my financial fight 7 years ago when I was single, pregnant with twins with no emergency fund, and was unemployed due to the closure of the company. I've utilized many financial podcasts to ensure I made smarter decisions than I had in the past, and ChooseFI is a great big hammer in my tool belt. You don't have to be extremely wealthy to get benefits from the show. Every episode has actionable tips that you can use. My car is littered with sticky notes. And even though I'm not in the position to take the steps others on the FI ladder are taking, I know what steps I need to take when I get there. Thank you, Brad and Jonathan, for all the hard work you do and for continuing to bring forth such high-quality guests and content.
And thank you to this community for being willing to join us on this journey. Can I say the fire is spreading without criticism now, Brad?
Let's do it.
The fire is spreading, my friends. We'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.
You've been listening to Choose FI Radio Podcast, where we help middle-class America build wealth, one life hack at a time.